Ji-hoon slammed Zuri against the walk-in freezer door, his mouth crashing onto hers with desperate hunger. She should push him away, should remember he's a killer, a criminal, a man whose enemies had just poisoned her restaurant and destroyed everything she'd built. Instead, she kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. "This is a mistake," she gasped when they broke apart. "I know." His forehead pressed against hers, both of them breathing hard. "Your world will destroy mine." "Probably." His hands tightened on her waist. "But I can't let you go." Outside the freezer, his men were cleaning up a crime scene. Inside, they were crossing a line neither could uncross. But to understand how a Haitian chef and a Korean Mafia boss ended up here, you'd have to go back 3 months to a snowy Miami night that changed everything. Hello, and welcome to Afro-Korean Romance Stories. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Like this video, and hit the subscribe button for more stories like this one. The evening Ji-hoon first saw Zuri Baptiste, he was in the middle of closing a deal that would expand his smuggling operations by 40%, sitting in the private room of his flagship Korean BBQ restaurant, while men in suits discussed shipping routes and payoff schedules. He lifted a perfectly grilled piece of galbi to his mouth, chewed once, and his face twisted in disgust. "This is garbage," he said in Korean to the chef hovering nearby, his voice cutting through the business negotiations like a blade. "Bland, soulless, fix it or you're done." The chef bowed and retreated, and Ji-hoon returned to business, unaware that across town, the woman who would unravel his carefully controlled world was losing hers. Zuri's laugh echoed through T. Manman's cramped kitchen as she plated griot with the precision of a surgeon, the fried pork glistening beside pickled vegetables, so vibrant they looked like edible jewels. "Marcus, table 6 needs their plantains," she called out, her Haitian Creole accent wrapping around the English words like music. The owner appeared in the kitchen doorway, and Zuri's smile died when she saw his face, defeated, hollowed out, the expression of a man who'd run out of options. "We need to talk after service," he said quietly, and Zuri's hands stilled on the plate, her heart suddenly racing because she knew that tone, had heard it before when everything fell apart. 3 hours later, standing in the empty restaurant with the scent of spices still hanging in the air, Marcus told her the truth. "I took a loan 6 months ago from Huang Enterprises. I couldn't make the payments. The building—" He couldn't finish, but he didn't need to. Zuri felt the words like a physical blow. Eviction, closure, the end of everything she'd rebuilt after losing her entire family to Hurricane Maria. "Who is this Huang?" Her voice came out steady despite the rage building in her chest. "Where is he?" "Zuri, you don't want to—" "Where is he?" 20 minutes later, Zuri stormed into Huang's upscale restaurant, still wearing her chef's coat, the fabric stained with the evidence of a full night's service, her natural hair pulled back in a practical bun, her dark skin glowing with sweat and fury. She pushed past the hostess, ignored the protests of staff members, and found him in an office overlooking the restaurant floor. Huang Ji-hoon, 34 years old, and devastating in an all-black suit, his Korean features sharp and aristocratic, his attention focused on documents spread across his desk. "You have 30 seconds before security removes you." He didn't bother looking up, his English perfect but accented, his tone bored. Zuri's hands clenched into fists. "You shut down T. Manman today. 15 people lost their jobs, good people with families." Ji-hoon finally raised his eyes, and Zuri felt the full weight of his gaze, cold, assessing, completely unimpressed. "Your boss didn't pay rent. I'm a businessman, not a charity." He glanced at his watch. a gesture so dismissive it made her teeth grind. 20 seconds. Something reckless took hold of her. She stepped closer to his desk, close enough to smell his expensive cologne, close enough to see the moment his eyes narrowed in warning. "Your food is boring." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ji-hoon stood slowly, unfolding to his full height, 6 feet of coiled danger and bruised pride. "Excuse me? Your galbi, over-marinated to hide low-quality meat. Your banchan lacks balance. Your kimchi—" She paused deliberately. "Is probably bought, not made. You run an empire but serve mediocrity." For 5 long seconds, Ji-hoon just stared at her, and Zuri wondered if she'd finally pushed too far, if those men in suits outside his office weren't just restaurant managers, but something far more dangerous. Then his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You have courage. Stupid courage, but courage." He circled his desk, moving with the predatory grace of a man who'd grown up fighting. "What's your name?" "Zuri Baptiste, and I have a proposition. I don't do business with people who insult me in my own establishment." "Then consider it a wager." She forced her voice to stay steady even as he stopped just inches away, invading her space with deliberate intent. "Let me cook one dish. If your customers prefer your food, I walk away forever. If they prefer mine, you give Marcus 3 months rent-free." Ji-hoon studied her face, his dark eyes searching for something she couldn't name. When he spoke, his voice was soft and infinitely more dangerous than when he'd been cold. "You fail. You work for me until the debt is paid. Every single dollar." He extended his hand. "Deal." Zuri took it, and the moment their palms touched, electricity shot up her arm. Not attraction, she told herself. Just adrenaline, just fear, just the desperate gamble of a woman with nothing left to lose. "Deal." The next evening, Zuri arrived at Ji-hoon's restaurant with her ingredients in a battered cooler, her hands steady, despite the hostile stares from his kitchen staff. Ji-hoon watched from his office window as she moved through the space like she owned it, commandeering a prep station, her fingers flying through mise en place with the confidence of someone who'd spent years perfecting her craft. She caught him watching once and met his gaze without flinching, and Ji-hoon felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Curiosity, maybe, or the first whisper of respect. He came down to the kitchen, unable to stay away, drawn by the scents rising from her station. Gochujang mixed with something he didn't recognize, something that made his mouth water despite himself. "You're using gochujang wrong," he said, leaning against her station with deliberately casual arrogance. Zuri didn't look up from the pork she was scoring with precise cuts. "I'm using it different. There's a difference. Korean cuisine has rules. So does Haitian cuisine. I'm honoring both." She lifted a spoon to his lips before he could protest. "Taste." Ji-hoon opened his mouth on instinct, and flavor exploded across his tongue. Heat and sweet, and something earthy and complex that he'd never experienced before. His eyes widened fractionally, and Zuri smiled triumphant. "That's epis, Haitian seasoning base, parsley, thyme, Scotch bonnet peppers, garlic. It's what you're missing." "Which is soul." She turned back to her cooking, dismissing him, and Ji-hoon found himself oddly reluctant to leave, watching the way her hands moved with such certainty, such passion, and wondering when he'd lost that fire in himself. 2 hours later, both dishes sat before a carefully selected group of his regular customers. His head chef's traditional bulgogi, beautiful and perfectly executed, beside Zuri's creation. Bulgogi marinated in Haitian epis, topped with kimchi-spiced pickles, served over coconut rice with a gochujang glaze that gleamed like rubies. Ji-hoon stood with his arms crossed, his face a mask of indifference, but his heart was pounding as he watched customer after customer reach for Zuri's dish first, their eyes widening, going back for seconds and thirds. "This is incredible. I've never tasted anything like this. Is this going on the menu?" Ji-hoon's jaw tightened with each exclamation, and when the verdict was unanimous, he turned and walked back to his office without a word. Zuri followed, her victory feeling suddenly hollow as she watched him pour expensive whiskey with hands that weren't quite steady. "You won," he said flatly. 3 months rent-free for your boss. You're actually honoring the bet?" She hadn't expected that, had braced herself for excuses, for the powerful man's inevitable backpedaling. Ji-hoon turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "I'm many things. A liar isn't one of them." He drained his glass in one swallow. "But I'm also not stupid. You have something my restaurants lack. Work for me. 6 months. Triple your current salary. Access to the best ingredients, equipment. No." The word hung between them like a challenge. Ji-hoon set down his glass with dangerous precision. "No. I don't work for men who see food as just profit. I watched your face when people loved that dish. You felt nothing. Food is culture, memory, love. You don't understand that. So how could I work for you? You know what I really am, don't you?" His voice went soft, and Zuri's pulse kicked up because, yes, she knew. The too expensive suits on men who didn't look like restaurant managers, the way people stepped out of his path with fear in their eyes, the rumors about Huang Enterprises and the port, and shipments that came in under darkness. "I know you're a man used to getting what he wants through fear," she said, lifting her chin. "I'm not afraid of you." For a long moment, Ji-hoon just looked at her, and then he smiled, really smiled, the expression transforming his face from coldly handsome to almost beautiful. 3 months. That's how long your restaurant has before reality catches up with idealism. When it fails, and it will, you'll come back, and you'll accept my offer." Zuri headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. "Don't hold your breath, Mr. Huang." She left, and Ji-hoon stood alone in his office, the taste of her food still on his tongue, something awakening in him that he'd thought dead for years. 3 months crawled by like a slow-motion car crash. Timanmen packed its tables every night, Zuri working double shifts until her hands cramped and her feet bled, but the money never stretched far enough. Marcus had debts she hadn't known about, suppliers, utilities, gambling losses that ate through their profits like acid. She counted receipts by candlelight when the electricity got shut off, too proud to cry, too stubborn to quit. And Ji-hoon watched. He told himself he was monitoring an investment, but the truth tasted different than lies. He sat in his black Mercedes across from Timanmen 3 nights a week, watching Zuri through the windows as she moved through the cramped space with such grace, such determination. He ordered takeout under false names, eating alone in his penthouse, savoring every bite and wondering why her food made him remember things he'd buried. His mother's kitchen before his father dragged him into the family business, the dreams of becoming a musician that died when duty demanded sacrifice. "Sir, that's the 3rd time this week," his assistant observed carefully as Ji-hoon ordered from Timanmen again. "I'm monitoring competition." "They're not competition." "Then I'm monitoring an investment." But his voice lacked conviction, and when he was alone, he didn't bother lying to himself anymore. The call came on a Thursday night. Ji-hoon was overseeing a weapons shipment at the port, his men efficient and silent as they moved crates, when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Huang?" Marcus's voice was thick with defeat. Zuri doesn't know I'm calling, but I thought you should know. We're closing, end of the month. I couldn't save it." Ji-hoon's hand tightened on the phone. as unexpected anger surged through him. She doesn't know? I haven't told her yet. Will tomorrow. I just thought, your offer. If it's still open, she'll need. It's open. Ji-hoon ended the call and stood staring at the dark water, his reflection rippling in the port's oily surface, and realized with sudden, uncomfortable clarity that Zuri's failure didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. The next evening, Zuri sat alone in the empty restaurant, the eviction notice heavy in her hands, tears finally falling because there was no one left to see them, no pride left to protect. The first sob tore from her throat like a physical thing, and she pressed her fist to her mouth, trying to hold back the flood of grief, for her grandmother who taught her to cook, for her parents and siblings lost to the hurricane, for every dream she'd rebuilt from nothing only to watch it crumble again. The knock on the door made her freeze. She wiped her eyes quickly, fury at being caught vulnerable making her movements sharp, as she opened the door to find Ji-hoon standing there in casual clothes, the first time she'd seen him in anything but a suit, jeans and a black t-shirt that showed the lean muscle of his arms, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. I heard, he said quietly. Come to gloat? Her voice came out raw, broken. No. He stepped inside without invitation and looked around at the space she'd poured her soul into. The Haitian art on the walls, the tables her hands had refinished, the kitchen where she'd created magic from scraps. Can I sit? Zuri gestured wordlessly, and they sat across from each other in silence until Ji-hoon finally spoke. My father wanted me to be a doctor. I wanted to be a musician, played piano, wrote songs, dreamed of concert halls. His hands flexed on the table, and Zuri noticed his fingers were long, elegant, a pianist's hands hidden inside a killer's life. He forced me into the family business. Every day I chose survival over dreams until I forgot I'd ever had dreams, until food became fuel, music became noise, and I became... He paused, jaw working, empty. Zuri stared at him, this powerful man showing her his scars. Why are you telling me this? Because you haven't forgotten your dreams, and watching you hold on to that passion, that fire. His voice roughened. I don't want to see that light go out. Then why offer me a job at your restaurant? That's not my dream. Ji-hoon leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. What if it could be? And that's when he told her about the failing restaurant location, the partnership offer, the chance to build something new from the ruins of what she'd lost. Zuri listened with her heart pounding, wanting to believe but afraid to hope, and when he extended his hand across the table, she stared at it for a long moment before taking it. Partners, she whispered. Partners, he agreed, and neither of them let go. But neither of them knew that Lorenzo Vega was already watching, already planning, already seeing Zuri as the perfect weapon to destroy the man who controlled too much of Miami's underworld. The storm was coming, and it would test everything they were building together. The restaurant space, Ji-hoon showed Zuri 3 days later, looked like a graveyard for ambition. Grease-stained walls, broken equipment, the lingering smell of failure soaked into every surface. But Zuri walked through it with her hand trailing along the scarred countertops, her eyes seeing something he couldn't. And when she turned to face him in the middle of that disaster, her smile was incandescent. I can work with this, she breathed, and Ji-hoon felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous and warm that he immediately tried to suppress. He was a Mafia boss. She was a complication. This was business. But when she grabbed his arm in excitement, sketching her vision in the air with animated hands, he stopped trying to convince himself and just watched her light up the darkness. Their first real fight happened 2 days into renovations. Zuri wanted vibrant colors, sunset oranges and ocean blues, Haitian murals celebrating her heritage. Ji-hoon argued for sleek minimalism, clean lines, the sophisticated aesthetic that marked all his properties. They stood toe to toe in the empty space, voices rising, neither willing to bend, and his crew watched nervously because nobody argued with Ji-hoon and walked away unscathed. "This is my vision," Zuri said, her dark eyes flashing. "You promised me creative control. I promised you partnership, which means compromise." Ji-hoon crossed his arms, his body language screaming dominance. "That color scheme will alienate half our potential customers." "Your customers? The ones who want safe and predictable and boring." She stepped closer, jabbing her finger into his chest, and Ji-hoon's eyes widened because nobody touched him like that, nobody dared. "I'm building something that honors where I come from. Take it or leave it." For a moment, his crew tensed, waiting for the explosion, but Ji-hoon started laughing, a real laugh that surprised everyone including himself. "You're impossible. I'm passionate. Learn the difference." But Zuri was smiling now, too, the tension breaking like a fever. "Fine. Your colors, my layout. We meet in the middle." "That's called compromise, Mafia boss. Try it more often." They shook on it, and this time when their hands touched, neither pulled away quickly. The electricity was still there, stronger now, undeniable. Ji-hoon's thumb brushed across her knuckles before he released her, and Zuri's breath caught at the tenderness of the gesture. His second in command, Min-jun, pulled Ji-hoon aside later that evening. "Boss, people are talking about you and the woman." "Let them talk." Ji-hoon didn't look up from the contracts he was reviewing. "Vega's people are watching. They see her as a weakness." Min-jun's voice dropped lower. "A vulnerability they can exploit." Ji-hoon's pen stilled on the paper. "Then make sure they understand what happens to anyone who even looks at her wrong. Spread the word. She's under my protection, explicitly." Min-jun hesitated. "That kind of declaration, it's usually reserved for family, for—" "Did I stutter?" Ji-hoon's voice went cold, the Mafia boss sliding back into place, like armor. "Make it known." After Min-jun left, Ji-hoon sat alone in his office, staring at the sketch Zuri had drawn of her dream restaurant, and wondered when exactly he'd stopped being able to lie to himself about what she was becoming to him. The cooking lessons started the following week. Zuri insisted, if they were partners, Ji-hoon needed to understand food beyond profit margins. She arrived at his penthouse kitchen with bags of groceries, her natural hair loose around her shoulders for the first time since he'd met her, and Ji-hoon found himself momentarily speechless at how beautiful she looked in his space. "We're making griot," she announced, unpacking ingredients with the efficiency of a general preparing for battle. "Haitian fried pork, my grandmother's recipe." Ji-hoon rolled up his sleeves, suddenly nervous in a way that business negotiations and Mafia standoffs never made him. "I don't cook." "You do now." She handed him a knife and a cutting board loaded with pork shoulder. "Cut it into 2-inch cubes, and Ji-hoon?" She waited until he met her eyes. "Stop thinking like a businessman. Feel the food. Listen to what it needs." "Food doesn't talk. Shows what you know." Her laugh was warm, teasing, and Ji-hoon found himself smiling despite his skepticism. She was a terrible teacher, in the best way. Impatient when he moved too slowly, demanding when his cuts weren't uniform, but her passion was infectious. She stood behind him, to guide his hands through the proper motion, her body pressed against his back, her breath warm on his neck, and Ji-hoon's concentration shattered completely. "Like this," she murmured, her hands covering his, directing the knife with practiced ease. "Smooth, confident, don't hesitate. Hard to concentrate with you this close." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Zuri went still, and Ji-hoon felt her heartbeat accelerate against his back. For a moment neither of them moved, the sexual tension thick enough to taste. Then she stepped away, her voice slightly unsteady. "Focus, Hwang, the meat won't marinate itself." But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of the attraction they'd been dancing around for weeks. Ji-hoon caught her staring at him later, as he finally got the technique right, and when their eyes met, neither looked away. The air crackled with possibility, with the dangerous question of what would happen if they stopped fighting what was building between them. They cooked through the evening, Zuri teaching him about epis and Scotch bonnets, and the way Haitian cuisine told stories of survival and resistance. Ji-hoon listened, really listened, and found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. How his mother used to sing while making kimchi. How the smell of gochugaru still made him think of her, even though she'd been gone for 15 years. How food was the last connection he had to the man he'd been before the Mafia consumed him. "You're not just what they made you," Zuri said softly, watching him plate the griot with surprising delicacy. "That person you were, he's still in there." "How do you know?" "Because I see him when you laugh, when you taste something that surprises you, when you look at me like—" She stopped, biting her lip. "Like what?" Ji-hoon moved closer, drawn to her like gravity. "Like I'm not just a business partner." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with hands that had done terrible things but touched her with infinite gentleness. "You stopped being just a business partner the moment you insulted my food and didn't flinch when I threatened you." Zuri's eyes fluttered closed. "This is complicated." "I know. Your world and mine. I know." His thumb traced her cheekbone, and her breath hitched. "But I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting to know everything about you. Can't stop." His phone shattered the moment, the ringtone sharp and insistent. Ji-hoon swore in Korean and checked the screen. "Minjun, emergency code." He answered, his voice instantly hard. "What?" "Vega made a move. Hit one of our storage facilities. 3 men in the hospital." Minjun's voice was tight with controlled rage. "He's sending a message." Ji-hoon's free hand clenched into a fist. "I'm on my way." He hung up and looked at Zuri, seeing the fear flickering in her eyes because she'd just been reminded exactly what he was. "I have to go. Business." Dangerous business. It wasn't a question. Always. He grabbed his jacket, the tender man from moments ago disappearing behind the Mafia boss's cold mask. "Lock the door behind me. Don't leave until morning." "Ji-hoon." She caught his arm. "Be careful." He looked down at her hand on him, then back at her face, and something in his expression made her heart ache. "I always am." But they both knew it was a lie. After he left, Zuri stood alone in his kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their evening together. Dirty dishes, the scent of spices, the ghost of almost kisses and unspoken confessions, and realized with terrifying clarity that she was falling for a man whose world could destroy her. The next 6 weeks blurred together in a montage of demolition and creation, late nights and early mornings, arguments and laughter and moments of connection that felt like touching fire. The restaurant transformed under their combined vision, Zuri's vibrant murals flowing seamlessly into Ji-hoon's sleek architectural lines, creating something neither could have built alone. They worked side by side, their partnership deepening with every shared decision, every compromise, every moment when their hands brushed and lingered. Ji-hoon brought in his best contractor, paid premium for rush delivery on equipment, used his connections to cut through permit red tape. Zuri created a menu that made his mouth water just reading it. fusion dishes that honored both their cultures with equal reverence. They tested recipes in his penthouse kitchen, feeding each other bites, arguing over seasoning ratios, and ignoring the fact that they kept finding excuses to touch, to stand too close, to let their eyes linger. "Try this," Zuri would say, lifting a spoon to his lips, and Ji-hoon would taste the food but watch her face, memorizing the way her eyes lit up when she got a flavor combination exactly right. "Too much gochugaru," he'd critique, and she'd swat his arm playfully, and he'd catch her hand and hold it just a beat too long, his thumb rubbing circles on her wrist until her pulse raced. His crew noticed. Minjun pulled him aside one evening, concern etched into his features. "Boss, you're getting attached. In our business, attachments are weapons people use against you." "She's my business partner, nothing more." But the lie tasted bitter. "With respect, sir, you don't look at business partners the way you look at her." Minjun hesitated. "Vega is watching, waiting, and when he moves, I'll handle Vega." Ji-hoon's voice went lethal. "Nobody touches her. Make sure every crew member understands. She's off limits to everyone, friend and enemy alike." What Ji-hoon didn't know was that Vega had already made his play, had already bribed one of the kitchen staff they'd hired for the new restaurant, had already planned the sabotage that would bring everything crashing down. Opening night arrived like a fever dream. The restaurant they'd named La Quai, Haitian Creole for home, packed with critics, community members, and Ji-hoon's business associates, who represented both his legitimate ventures and his darker enterprises. Zuri moved through the kitchen like a conductor leading an orchestra, her commands sharp and precise, her dishes going out with perfect timing. Ji-hoon worked the dining room in an impeccable black suit, charming guests with the social grace that made people forget he was dangerous, but his eyes kept drifting to the kitchen window, where he could see Zuri in her element. The first hour was flawless. Customers raved over every dish. The kimchi-infused pickles that exploded with flavor, the bulgogi tacos with mango habanero salsa, the coconut rice infused with gochujang that somehow tasted like both cultures singing in harmony. Food critics took notes with expressions of wonder. Ji-hoon caught Zuri's eye through the kitchen window, and they shared a smile of pure triumph. Then everything went to hell. The first customer complained of nausea at 8:47 p.m. By 8:55, 3 more were showing symptoms. At 9:03, someone vomited in the bathroom. Panic rippled through the dining room like wildfire, and Zuri burst out of the kitchen, her face stricken with horror. "I checked everything," she said, her voice breaking. "Every temperature, every ingredient. This isn't possible." "Everyone remain calm," Ji-hoon commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos with authority. But inside, cold rage was building because he knew. This wasn't an accident. This was an attack. The health inspector arrived with suspicious speed, finding evidence of contamination in multiple dishes. Paramedics loaded sick customers into ambulances. News crews materialized out of nowhere, cameras capturing every moment of the disaster. The restaurant was shut down pending investigation, and Zuri stood in the middle of her dream turning to ashes, tears streaming down her face as everything she'd worked for collapsed around her. Ji-hoon found her an hour later, sitting alone in the empty kitchen, mascara streaked and broken. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his, and his heart cracked at the devastation in her eyes. "This isn't your fault. My name is on the door, my reputation. No one will ever trust me again." Her voice was hollow, all the fight drained out of her. "I should never have partnered with you. Your world did this, your enemies. I was too proud to see that being close to you would paint a target on my back. Zuri, don't. She pulled her hands away, and the loss of her touch felt like amputation. Just don't. I need to think. She left him kneeling on the kitchen floor, and Ji-hoon stayed there for a long moment, breathing through the unfamiliar ache of actual heartbreak, before the grief transmuted into something colder, sharper, infinitely more dangerous. He made 3 calls, the first to Min-jun. Find out who did this. I want names by morning. The second to his tech specialist. Pull security footage from every camera in a 3-block radius. Someone poisoned the food. Find them. The third to his second cousin in the police department. I need the health inspector's report. The real one, not the version Vega paid him to file. Then he sat in his car, outside the dark restaurant, and waited for answers, his hands steady on the steering wheel, but his mind replaying the devastation on Zuri's face over and over, until he thought he might actually understand what breaking felt like. The call came at 3 a.m. It's confirmed, boss. Vega's crew. They got to one of the prep cooks, paid him to contaminate the gochujang batch before service. We have the cook in custody. Ji-hoon's voice was utterly calm, which his men knew meant violence was coming. Bring him to the warehouse and send word to Vega. Tell him I'm calling a meeting, neutral ground, tomorrow night. Boss, that's basically declaring war. I know exactly what it is. Ji-hoon ended the call and stared at the dark restaurant, where he'd started to believe in something beyond power and money and fear, where he'd started to believe he could be more than what his father had made him. Vega had taken that from him, had hurt Zuri to hurt him, and Ji-hoon was going to make sure he understood exactly what that cost. But first he had to convince Zuri not to walk away from him forever. And looking at his phone, where her last text still glowed, I can't do this anymore. He wasn't sure that was a battle he could win. The next morning, Ji-hoon stood outside Zuri's apartment, 3 floors up in a building that had seen better decades, and tried to find words that would make this right. He'd faced down rival gangs, negotiated with cartel bosses, stared down the barrel of guns without flinching. But knocking on this door terrified him. She answered on the 3rd knock, and the sight of her made his chest tight. Eyes swollen from crying, hair wrapped in a scarf, wearing an old t-shirt that had probably been her father's, based on the size. She looked at him with such wary exhaustion that Ji-hoon wanted to burn down the entire city for putting that expression on her face. I'm fixing this, he said without preamble. Vega poisoned the food. I have proof. By tomorrow everyone will know the truth and he'll... Stop. Zuri's voice was quiet but firm. Just stop, Ji-hoon. More violence won't fix this. It'll just prove that I made a mistake getting involved with you. The words hit him like physical blows. A mistake? What did you think this was? She wrapped her arms around herself, defensive and hurting. A fairy tale. The Mafia boss and the chef, living happily ever after. Your world destroyed mine. That's what happens when people like me get close to people like you. I warned you there would be risks. You didn't warn me I'd... She stopped abruptly, but Ji-hoon heard what she didn't say. You'd what? He stepped closer, desperate. Finish it, Zuri. You didn't warn you that you'd what? Fall for you? The words exploded out of her, raw and angry and terrified. I didn't expect to fall for a man whose enemies poison restaurants to get back at him. A man who solves problems with violence and intimidation. A man who... Her voice cracked. A man who makes me feel things I swore I'd never feel again, because losing people destroys me, Ji-hoon. It breaks me in ways I can't fix. Ji-hoon stood frozen, her confession rearranging everything in his chest. You fell for me? Don't look so surprised. You're brilliant and protective, and you laugh at my jokes, and you learn to cook for me, and... Tears were streaming down her face now. And none of it matters, because your world will always hurt the people you care about. That's the truth you won't say. Then let me say another truth. Ji-hoon closed the distance between them, framing her face with his hands, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I fell for you too, the moment you called my food boring and didn't flinch when I threatened you. Every day since, watching you fight for your dreams, watching you create magic from nothing, watching you challenge me to be better than what I was raised to be. His voice roughened with emotion. You're right that my world is dangerous, that it destroys things. But Zuri, you make me want to build instead of break. You make me remember the man I was supposed to be. Ji-hoon? She was crying openly now, her hands coming up to cover his. I'm going to end this, with Vega, with anyone who threatens you, not through more violence, but through strategy. I'm going to clear your name, rebuild the restaurant, and prove that being with me doesn't mean watching everything burn. He leaned his forehead against hers, breathing her in. But I need to know, if I do this, if I make this right, will you give us a real chance, not as partners, as what we've been dancing around for months? She pulled back just enough to see his face, as something terrifying and impossible, and he kissed her, finally, desperately, pouring months of longing into the press of his lips against hers. Zuri made a sound somewhere between a sob and a sigh, and kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss tasted like salt from their tears, and smoke from the ashes of what they'd built, and it felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ji-hoon rested his forehead against hers. I have to go, have to finish this. But Zuri, wait for me, trust me to fix this. She nodded, unable to speak, and watched him leave with her heart in her throat and the taste of him still on her lips. And that's when her door burst open again, and Lorenzo Vega walked in with 2 armed men, his smile sharp as broken glass. Sorry to interrupt the romantic moment, he said, gesturing for his men to grab Zuri's arms. But you and I are going to have a conversation about your boyfriend's business territories, and if he wants to see you alive again, he'll learn that some things are worth more than pride. Zuri's scream cut off as a hand clamped over her mouth, and the last thing she saw before the darkness took her was her phone on the table, Ji-hoon's contact information glowing on the screen, so close and impossibly far away. The war Ji-hoon had been trying to avoid was about to begin, and the woman he loved was the first casualty. But Vega had made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated exactly how far a man in love would go to get her back, and how much the city's most dangerous Mafia boss was willing to burn to save the one person who'd made him feel human again. The reckoning was coming, and it would be written in fire and blood, and the desperate hope that love could survive even the darkest parts of who they were. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you do if you were Zuri? Like this video and hit the subscribe button, because you won't want to miss how this story ends. The final confrontation is coming, and nobody's walking away unchanged. Ji-hoon was halfway to the warehouse when Minjun's call came through. Boss, we have a problem. Vega just grabbed the girl. The world stopped. Ji-hoon's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white, a cold fury, unlike anything he'd ever felt, flooding his veins. Where? Abandoned textile factory on Collins Avenue. He's demanding you meet him alone, or I'm 10 minutes out. Gather everyone. Full crew. This ends tonight. Ji-hoon's voice was arctic calm, the kind of quiet that made grown men fear for their lives. And Minjun? Tell them to come armed. Vega just made the last mistake of his life. 8 minutes later, Ji-hoon walked into that textile factory alone, as demanded, but his men surrounded the building like shadows, waiting for his signal. He found Vega in the center of the main floor, Zuri tied to a chair beside him, a bruise blooming on her cheekbone that made Ji-hoon's vision go red. "Let her go," Ji-hoon said, his voice deadly soft. "This is between us." Vega laughed, pressing a gun to Zuri's temple. "See, that's where you're wrong. She is the issue between us. You got soft, Huang, started caring about something other than business. That makes you weak." "Ji-hoon, don't," Zuri said, her voice steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "Don't give him anything for me." "Brave girl," Vega sneered, "but stupid. You think he loves you? Men like us don't love. We collect. We possess. You're wrong." Ji-hoon took a step forward, hands visible and empty. "I do love her, which is why I'm going to give you one last chance to walk away from this alive. Let her go. Leave Miami. I'll even let you keep your operations in Tampa. But touch her again, and I will erase you from existence." Vega's finger tightened on the trigger. Big threats from a man with no leverage. "Who said I have no leverage?" Ji-hoon smiled, cold and sharp. "Min-jun, now." The lights cut out. Gunfire erupted from every direction, not aimed to kill, but to disorient, to scatter Vega's men who'd been hiding in the shadows. In the chaos, Ji-hoon moved with lethal precision, crossing the distance to Vega in seconds. A single strike disarmed him, and Ji-hoon had Vega on the ground with a gun to his head before the man could even scream. "I told you," Ji-hoon said softly, pulling Zuri's chair back with his free hand, "that touching her would cost you everything." Min-jun's men flooded in, weapons trained on Vega's scattered crew. The fight was over before it really began. Ji-hoon untied Zuri with shaking hands, and the moment she was free, she threw her arms around him, trembling. "You came." "Always," he whispered into her hair. "I'll always come for you." Vega laughed bitterly from the floor. "You think this changes anything? She'll always be a target. Everyone you care about becomes a weapon against you. That's the life, Huang." Ji-hoon looked down at him, then at Zuri in his arms, and made a decision that would change everything. "Min-jun, make sure Mr. Vega understands the new reality. He confesses to the food poisoning publicly. He compensates every person who got sick. He leaves Florida entirely, and in exchange, I don't kill him tonight." "And if he refuses," Min-jun asked, "then we stop being generous." Ji-hoon's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Spread the word through every crew in Miami. Zuri Baptiste is under my permanent protection. She's not a weakness. She's the line no one crosses unless they want war with the Huang family. Make it clear." He helped Zuri to her feet, and they walked out of that factory together, leaving his men to handle the cleanup. In his car, with the city lights blurring past, Zuri finally broke the silence. "You just declared me family to the entire Miami underworld." "I did." Ji-hoon kept his eyes on the road, jaw tight. That's basically a marriage declaration in Mafia terms." "I know what it means." "Ji-hoon, look at me." When he did, she saw vulnerability in his eyes that took her breath away. "Did you mean it? All of it?" He pulled the car over, turning to face her fully. "I meant every word. I love you, Zuri. Not as a possession, not as a weakness, but as the person who reminded me I'm more than what my father made me. The person who makes me want to build instead of destroy." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "I know my world is dangerous. I know being with me means living with that danger. But I swear I will spend every day protecting you, honoring you, being worthy of what you've given me." Zuri was crying again, but this time from relief, from joy, from the overwhelming rightness of this impossible love. I love you too, even though you're arrogant and controlling, and you probably paid off half the city to make this work. He kissed her, swallowing